College Football with Sam here with my friend JT Sports. Make sure to check out his channel if you haven't already. Give him a subscribe and like his content and watch it. The link to his channel is in the description. Tonight, what we're just going to be doing is looking at picks and giving our analysis on Big 12 and Big 10 games. We'll look at Miami versus Virginia Tech as well. My JT is a huge Miami fan, so we have to talk about that and how the Canes are doing because they're very impressive. And then we also have to get to, of course, Penn State versus Illinois, the Big Ten's game of the week. We'll touch on the Big 12, do a little bit of, Oklahoma State versus Kansas State, some Colorado versus UCF, Utah versus Arizona. And then in the Big Ten, of course, we got Michigan versus Minnesota. We got USC versus Wisconsin. We're just going to be talking a lot of college football here, specifically for the Big 12 and also for the Big Ten. So, JT, how are you doing?
Man, I'm doing great. It's always awesome to be watching college football. I had a very good time watching Illinois versus Nebraska last week. You know, what's strange about those Friday night games is that, you don't really expect them to be that good because it's like, wow, you put some of the better games on Fridays. So I was very surprised to be treated to the classic that was Illinois versus Nebraska. Like Nebraska kind of had that game for the majority of it. And then, you get put in a 4th and 3. You got a backup kicker. Of course, he misses that 39-yard field goal. And we go to OT, and Illinois sneaks it out. So I've had a very great time watching college football this year. One of the funnest seasons that I can remember.
Yeah, what do you think so far about the teams at the top? Like, who do you think the best teams are? What team has surprised you so far this season? I got to be honest with you. A team that has surprised me so far this season outside of Illinois has to be Texas and a little bit of how invincible they've looked.
I'll say the team that has surprised me the most up to this point has to be Florida State. Didn't think they were going to look this bad. I was never that high on them in the first place, but they're just god awful. And going into the season, I was screaming they were overrated. Nobody wanted to believe me, but I'll be lying if I would have thought they would have been this bad, this dreadful. A team that surprised me with how good they have been, probably going to have to go with Illinois as well. Luke Altmaier has just been a complete 360 from I was watching them last year. Last year, I couldn't even watch most of the Illinois games, man. It was a boring brand of football. You just want to run it and see bad quarterback play, rely on good defense. Yeah, I was good off Ellie last year, but I was surprised to see Luke Altmaier slinging that football around, Sam. And he was slinging that rock with some precision and some good accuracy. And I was like, did they get a new transfer quarterback in there that got Luke Altmaier's number? Like, listen, with how good Ellie is on the trenches on both sides of the football, there isn't too many games that they don't have a shot at being able to win. And as far as the teams at the top, the teams that are there are the ones that most expected to be there. Texas, they had one of the better rosters in college football coming into this year. Georgia, I still believe Georgia is one of the better teams in America, but they're not going to have the record because they got 3 of their toughest games of the season on the road. This week, they're playing Alabama, and their next 2 road trips that are tough are on the road against Ole Miss and Texas. So there's a good chance they could be 9-3 because they're not what they normally are up front. They're lacking depth, and they have some injuries on the D-line and O-lines.
Yeah, I saw that Tate Ratledge was out, which is, well, to put it lightly, quite unfortunate. When you already lose an All-American center in Cedric Van Pran, and then you're down like an All-American caliber guard, and you're taking the road, that really does hurt.
Yeah, and one thing about playing on the road in the SEC is that there are no gimmies. And what I was trying to say a few weeks ago about Tennessee, Oklahoma, a lot of people had Tennessee winning that game in blowout fashion, putting 40 on OU's defense. I didn't really see it, and it didn't happen. I believe the game was a little bit closer than what most people say. I don't agree with this sentiment that Tennessee dominated that game. I know Josh Heupel got conservative in the second half with the play calling, but let's not try to act like Oklahoma's defense wasn't getting up with Tennessee's offense. Nico had a few fumbles that OU defense caused. Like, if they would have had some damn competent quarterback play, Jackson Arnold, with the way that game played, I thought that Vegas had made that phone call, Sam. And we got $1 million for you, Jackson Arnold, if you throw this game for Tennessee. And that's the way it was looking at first. It's just absolutely insane how bad the quarterback play has been for all the dollars that these guys are getting paid, Sam. Like Riley Leonard, DJU, these guys got to be the biggest scam artists in America right now because they're getting paid all this money to play terrible, but their head coaches refuse to bench them. Like, I got a lot of respect for Brent Venables pulling the plug on Jackson Arnold. He was willing to take it on the chin. We threw you a lot of money. You ain't giving us the play we expect, so bump what we paid you. We're going to bench you. Mike Norvell and Marcus Freeman, they refuse to do the same. It's like the definition of insanity is to do the same thing and get the same results that you don't like, Sam. Like, NIL and quarterback play have been really terrible.
Yeah.
Did you see the story with UNLV losing their quarterback? He quit on the team.
Yeah, but he isn't even completing 50% of his throws. Like, I would toss him out the window. Like, you can't, if you can't even complete 50% of your throws, why are you demanding an NIL check? Like, that doesn't compute. That doesn't make any sense. But it is what it is at this point. And I can't really complain. I'm not in control of any of this. It just is what it is. But yeah, I saw that story, and then the Bear Alexander story, and then Bear Alexander's, I guess, dad tweeting that he's somehow better than Mason Graham because, well, high school recruiting rankings determine your future. It's absolutely insane. But that I think right now is just a small segment of the sport. There are problems in the sport, but I kind of want to save that for the preseason when, starting next season, I believe, universities can actually directly pay their players and will have a salary cap. Let's get into talking about all these different games here, shall we? And before we do that, I just want to mention the sponsor for this live stream, Chris Gates Fitness. If you don't have much time to work out and you want to get fit, you want to get strong, you want to lose weight, and you want to do all of that while eating hamburgers and hot dogs and your favorite meals or desserts, drinking beer while tailgating, you can do all of that because Chris Gates has developed his workout plans to, well, fit the life of a busy person, an adult, as all of us are on this channel, or at least most of us, who also likes to enjoy football and to have fun and, not eat chicken and rice for 28 days in a row on his meal plan. And you can do that. So if you want someone to help motivate you to do that, if you need a little bit of an extra push, you're new to this whole workout thing, and you just want a helping hand, go visit chrisgatesfitness.com and type in at the checkout code SAM, S-A-M, or you can visit the link in the pinned comment, chrisgatesfitness.com/collegefootballwithsam/ You get 80% off your first month using the discount code. Thanks to Chris Gates for sponsoring this live stream, this channel, and he's also a football fan. He didn't just develop his workout programs for football fans. He himself is a Pitt Panthers fan, and Pitt's 4-0, beat West Virginia, crushed Youngstown State. So check out his stuff, and you won't regret it. But let's dive in and let's just start off Friday. And let's look at first Virginia Tech and Miami. Then we'll get into Rutgers versus Washington. So Virginia Tech's coming off of a loss to Rutgers, actually, where Tech nearly came back. Rutgers nearly blew the game away, but they didn't. they came out and won thanks to Ethan Kaliakmanis and Kyle Monungai. Miami is 4-0. They're ranked 7th nationally. What do you think about them right now? I mean, they're your team. You got to be excited that they're top 10 and they're blowing everyone out left and right, that they have an offense and seemingly a defense. I mean, what do you think, and what's your read on this game?
As far as the Miami Hurricanes, man, I'm keeping my expectations modest. I picked them to win the ACC before the season started, but, even though they're playing up to the level expected, I still have my expectations somewhat modest because we've been here before, Sam. This team will start out fast, and then, they'll lose a game like what they're playing against Virginia Tech tomorrow. And, the season will kind of go left. So I'm just trying to take it week by week with Miami. I got to see it to believe it at this point. I've been through way too many heartbreaks with this team to have a lot of confidence in them. It's just right now, Cam Ward is playing some extremely good football. He looks like a top 3 Heisman candidate right now. There aren't too many quarterbacks in the nation that are playing as good as what Cam Ward is. The D-line has been outstanding. Tyler Barron, he's been one of the better pass rushers in the ACC this year. And you're going up against a Virginia Tech team that, like Miami, had a lot of hype coming into this season. And unlike the Hurricanes, Virginia Tech hasn't lived up to it. Already lost to Vanderbilt and Rutgers. Kyron Drones hasn't shown too much improvement as a passer. He's completing under 60% of his passes. And they're banged up at wide receiver coming into this game. They got 3 wide receivers on the injury report, including one of their better wideouts. And the only way they can really have an effective offense is if they're able to get the run game going. Their running back has had like 7 touchdowns over the last 3-4 weeks. So they got a good ground game. Kyron Drones is also a part of that. But their defense has been a huge disappointment. And for a team that has the amount of experience that they have this year, you don't expect this team to play as bad as what they've had the last couple of weeks. Their run defense isn't good. They're 95th in the nation in rushing yards per game allowed. Miami, they got one of the better rushing attacks in all of college football. Damian Martinez, you got a lot of depth behind him as well. And you also can throw the football. So unless Virginia Tech can find a way to sustain a little bit of efficiency passing the football, they're SOL because Miami has a top 10 run defense. And their O-line hasn't played that well neither. So you got a game where you got 2 teams who are heading in opposite directions in terms of the trajectory of where their seasons are heading. Miami, it looks like they continue to climb. Meanwhile, it looks like Virginia Tech continues to decline week after week with some of these recent performances that they've been having. So I love Miami to win this game. I will take Virginia Tech to cover that plus 19, though, because this could be a Mario Cristobal special. And Mario Cristobal, he's going to have you ready to play for the big games. But when it comes to going up against teams like VT, that you got these big point spreads, it should be an easy walk in the park. Games like this normally have tended to be a struggle for Miami. So I could see this being a tightly contested game for the first 3 quarters. Miami pulls away in the end.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm thinking in this game is twofold. I either think that this is close and maybe Miami nearly chokes or has a disappointment, but they still win, or they just come out and win by 30 or 40 points like they have really in their first 4 games. I know that some of that's hyperbole, and like Florida, of course, played them closer than 40 points, but Miami has felt like this team that has just annihilated everyone, like whether it is by the 20s or 30s or 40s or more than that. They're a really good team. I mean, Cam Ward is 14 passing touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 1,439 yards, and that's through 4 games. He's averaging well over 300 yards per game. And like you said, they have a top 10 rushing defense. I looked that up when doing a little bit of research on this game. They're top 10 in yards per carry allowed. They're top 10 in rushing yards allowed. And that's facing Florida, who has a decent stable of backs and SEC talent. That's them facing South Florida, who did better against Alabama than they did against Miami. I know Byron Brown was hurt, I think, for that second half, but regardless, this is a really good team, a legitimate team, a team that immediately after Florida State lost to Georgia Tech, I picked them to win the ACC. And I have not changed that since. I think it's them right now, clearly in tier 1 in the ACC. And there's a steep drop-off and you get to Clemson. And there's probably another steep drop-off, and I don't know where you go from there. I think the conference is total chaos after you get to that point. But it, you know what, is what it is. I think that Miami will win what has been a weak sauce conference, and I think they'll start by winning this game. I'd take them to win, and I'd honestly take them to cover. I mean, Miami is much better than Rutgers. They're much better than Vanderbilt. And Rutgers should have beaten Virginia Tech by 20. They just were stopped on 4th and goal, which is unusual for Rutgers. Virginia Tech got some turnovers and big plays that are pretty atypical. And yeah, that just happened. So I'm in agreement with you there. The other Friday game, speaking of Rutgers, is, well, Rutgers versus Washington. What do you think about that? Rutgers is only currently favored by 2, and Washington is traveling all across the country to play in Piscataway.
In terms of who is in the leader for winning the Jim Moore Award, has to be Rutgers. Pro Football Focus, PFF, they graded Rutgers' offensive line out to be the number 1 in college football right now. And me and you are a little bit high on Rutgers going into this season. We felt they could be dark horse contenders in the Big Ten this year, depending on if they could get some decent quarterback play. I still don't know about, however you say his last name. It's really long to pronounce it. Salute to you. But we know with Washington, they got some big concerns up front. They basically got like an offensive line from the portal, and they already lost to Washington State. A lot of Huskies fans were upset about that. And this really is a rebuilding year for Washington. I expect Rutgers to come in here and win this game by at least by 10, because I don't really think that this year's Washington team is built to be able to handle a school like Rutgers, where their biggest concerns are up front and Rutgers' biggest strengths is in the trenches, on the line of scrimmage. And Kaliakmanis, I ain't even going to continue to try, Sam. But yeah, he's been decent enough where they're not asking him to do too much, and he's been able to make some big time throws in certain moments for the most part. But the only thing that kind of scares me about Rutgers in this game is if they let Jonah Coleman, Washington's starting running back, go crazy, because I think he's one of the more underrated backs in the country. He has a rare blend of good size, explosiveness, but he's also really physical. He can run through you as well. He can get north to south really fast within the snap of a finger. And if he ends up having one of those games where he has like 3 touchdowns, 150 rushing yards, and he's just a freight train, this definitely could be a different game. But, Washington, I just don't think they have it up front to be able to keep this a fairly competitive ball game of Rutgers.
Yeah, I looked at Rutgers' rushing defense because I know that Washington is Jonah Coleman. They also have Will Rogers at quarterback. Giles Jackson's their leading receiver right now. And Jed Fish and Brennan Carroll are great offensive minds, so I know that they have capacity there. Rutgers has allowed over 6 yards per carry on average to not just Virginia Tech, but to Akron as well. So there's a big concern for Rutgers' front, I think, to hold up against Jonah Coleman and a Washington rushing attack that you do have to respect and that you will have to stop. And Will Rogers and Ethan Kaliakmanis have been very similar this year. They've actually performed at a good level. Not a great level, not elite, but they've done well. So looking at this matchup here, really I think what it comes down to is, in my view, what can Rutgers do to stop Washington's rushing attack? And also, what can Washington do to stop Rutgers' rushing attack? Like, it is going to be the battle of the trenches. And I think that the biggest matchup is ultimately Rutgers' offensive line, which is right now the best in the country, particularly at run blocking, against a Washington defensive line that's grading out rather well, particularly at defensive end. So I would take Rutgers here because it's at home. It's a short week for both teams, and it's across the country for Washington. Plus, Rutgers, I think, has done a better job controlling their games, and they have more of an identity than Washington does right now. Washington, losing to Washington State, who I think is a good team, but not a great team. And then the way that they beat Northwestern, that just did not give me much confidence because I think Northwestern is a pretty bad football team. I'd also, as you all will see tomorrow in my Rutgers-Washington preview and prediction video, wanted to get it out today, but had school, didn't have the time to really do it. I got Rutgers taking this thing by 10, so I have them winning and covering the spread. All right, you want to get through Big 12 games, and then after we get through the Big 12 and the Big 10 and do quick picks, we'll zoom in on a few games. Sounds like a plan?
Absolutely.
All right, so really quickly for each of these. Oklahoma State at Kansas State. Kansas State is a 5-point favorite. Kansas State's coming off of a big loss to BYU, 38-9. Oklahoma State is coming off of a 22-19 loss to Utah. Which team comes out on top in a Big 12 showdown?
I'm taking Oklahoma State, man. Like, I know Alex Bowman hasn't looked that good, but neither has Avery Johnson. And Kansas State, they got absolutely destroyed. I believe they blew out Arizona, but yeah, that loss to BYU was really bad. Avery Johnson isn't really living up to the hype. And at least with Oklahoma State, I think that overall they got a better overall team than what Kansas State has. So
Really?
I like Oklahoma State. Honestly, when I watch Oklahoma State play, they've just looked more impressive to me than what Kansas has, as far as the fact that they got a pretty decent offensive line. They are kind of struggling. They haven't really been as good as expected, but I just don't really see it with Kansas State this year. With Avery Johnson, man, he hasn't been what people expect it to be. Kansas State does have some good backs. Ollie Gordon, it's kind of been a little bit of some troubles trying to get him involved, but I like Oklahoma State right now. I just feel with the way their season's going, they have a way better team than what Kansas State has right now. I've been really disappointed with what I've been seeing out of Kansas State.
Yeah, that loss to BYU was pretty bad. But what I will say is BYU had a few defensive and special team scores. BYU is a team this year that has done a very good job on defense. They're very explosive on offense, a little bit inconsistent there, but very explosive when they're on point. And Kansas State outgained them. It was just defensive scores, an awesome punt return that was a near disaster, but really good. And it was at night in Provo. I'm honestly taking Kansas State to win. I don't know if I'd take them to cover, but I think that Oklahoma State not being able to run the football is kind of a spell of doom. Kansas State, even with the issues they have with Avery Johnson at quarterback, they can just tell them, don't throw it. We're going to run with DJ Giddens, and we're going to run you behind Hadley Panzer in that offensive line. And it's also at home. But I don't have a huge read on this game because, as you said, for all that Oklahoma State returned, they've been very disappointing, but you know there's something there. And as for Kansas State, I mean, when you lose to anyone 38-9 and you give up several turnovers and it just looks as gross as that did, that does not give you a lot of confidence that they're really a good team. Up next, I got BYU, the team who upset Kansas State, taking on Baylor on the road. Baylor is favored by 3. They're coming off of a 38-31 overtime loss to Colorado on a what was a Hail Mary play. I wasn't even surprised that it happened, given how just bad Baylor is. And BYU, while sitting at 22 in the ratings, I think is a little bit overrated. But Jake Retzlaff's been impressive.
I like BYU to win. It's not looking good for Dave Aranda down there. We all know about Billy Napier's hot seat status, but the guy whose hot seat was just as hot as Billy's was Dave Aranda's, and losing to Colorado in the fashion that they did, man, is absolutely embarrassing. And his leash has to be pretty short right now. Their defense isn't as good as what you expect from a Dave Aranda coach team. And anytime you have a defense that specializes in one area of the ball and it's not good, it's a huge red flag. Their quarterback situation, they got this dude named Daquan Finn out of the portal from Toledo, paid him a lot of money, and they already benched him. The dude they had in last week played pretty well, pretty good on the ground, but I like BYU. They're the better coach team. They got a lot of momentum right now. And for Dave Aranda, I just feel like at this point after that Colorado loss, he pretty much has lost this team. And I don't really see them being able to get too many wins, man. I think that it's only a matter of time until he gets that pink slip. So I love BYU to get the win. I can't really give you a score prediction. I don't see it being a one-sided affair. I can't see this being a tightly contested game. But I just like BYU a little bit more than I love Baylor right now.
Yeah, I'm not confident here at all because while I think that BYU has been much more efficient and well coached this season, I also got to remember that when a ranked team is on the road and they're an underdog, that's typically indicative that that home favorite is going to win. Just for that reason alone, and the fact that Baylor showed they do have some pieces, just some, not a whole lot. I would take them to win, but I'm not confident here one bit. I, however, am pretty confident that Kansas is going to smoke TCU. I'm pretty confident in that. I mean, TCU blowing that game to UCF, losing by 20 and allowing 60 points to SMU. Meanwhile, Kansas has been close loss after close loss after close loss. I feel like they're ready to finally eke out a win with their powerful run game led by Devin Neal and Daniel Highshaw. And TCU just looks lost to me. Are you in agreement with me there?
Honestly, Sam, I feel like both of these teams out there looking lost this season. Kansas had a lot of hype coming into this year, and their offense isn't as good as expected. They lost their offensive coordinator to Penn State. You're pretty familiar with them. Total Nicky, Nakoto Nicky. Yeah, he's gone. And with Andy Nakoto Nicky being gone, this offense doesn't even look recognizable, Sam. I mean, they lost to UNLV. They lost Illinois. Jalen Daniels. I don't even know what has happened to this brother, man. The fall off of Jalen Daniels has to be studied, man. He doesn't even look recognizable of how bad he's been playing this year. Me personally, I lean TCU. I know one thing about TCU is that their offense is going to score points. Don't know about their defense. With Kansas, I don't really trust their offense as much. Even though they did score season high 28 points against West Virginia, I just trust TCU a little bit more than I trust where Kansas is right now. Unless Jalen Daniels can wake up and look like the superstar that we thought he was, I like TCU, even though Kansas is playing at home.
Yeah, I personally don't think that Jalen Daniels is going to wake up. He is asleep. He will stay asleep. I just think that Kansas, with some defensive players they have in their run game, is just going to do a little bit of a Wisconsin, Iowa, and just ground and pound their way to winning a few games. But at 1-3, there's a pretty good chance they could miss a bowl game even with an easy schedule. Up next, we have Colorado taking on UCF in Orlando, in the bounce house, on the road. UCF opened up as a massive favorite. I think originally it was minus 14 or minus 15. It's at minus 14 UCF right now. Who do you have here? I personally have UCF winning, but I have Colorado covering because of they don't typically get blown out, nor do they typically blow their opponents out. It's either one score their way or one score the other way, unless they're facing a juggernaut. And I don't think UCF's a juggernaut.
I'm rolling with the Buffs, man. Listen, UCF for this point spread to be this big is really surprising me because they have to come from behind to beat TCU, who isn't that good. And their offense is a three-headed monster. We already know about KJ Jefferson, but they got a stud and RJ Harvey at running back, Kobe Hudson at wide receiver. But other than that, there's not really a lot to be confident about when it comes to UCF winning this game because Colorado has the better team than me. The reason why people are so confident UCF is going to win is because they should be able to ground and pound Colorado to death. That when you think of Gus Malzahn teams, normally they're really good running the football, but KJ Jefferson hasn't looked like the guy he used to be 2 years ago. And when you got two of the best players in college football, Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, I think that automatically kind of tilts the game in your favor because when you got two of the best players in America on one team, it gives you a great advantage because you know that no matter how bad this game goes, those players are going to be consistent for you and being able to sustain drives, making big plays to keep you in it. And UCF doesn't have that great of a defense.
They don't, no.
If TCU, like for you to beat Colorado, you got to have a stout defensive line for you to just be able to dominate this team like Nebraska. And no team in the Big 12 really has that outside of probably Utah.
Yeah, so Utah's awesome up there.
So exactly. So if you can't get pressure on Shedeur, he's going to kill you. With the talent Colorado has at receiver, Sam, this is quietly one of the best receiver rooms in America. You saw LaJohntay Western get that game-winning touchdown last week. You've seen what Jimmy Horn can do. You know about Travis Hunter. You know about Will Shepherd. So with the amount of talent that Colorado has offensively, this is right in their ballpark. This is going to be a high-scoring game. They're going to be able to put up points. And I trust Colorado's defense to be able to slow down UCF's rushing attack in key moments of this game. They have struggled against the run, especially the quarterback run has killed them. But one thing about Colorado is that, unlike last year, their defense is able to get a few stops. And with that, their offense should be able to hum.
Yeah, Travis Hunter is in a fair world is probably like where the Heisman isn't a quarterback award. He's probably the winner. My thing is just UCF, it's at home, so you get the same cross-travel effect that like Washington has with Rutgers. And like you said, UCF is running the ball, and they don't just have one running back or two running backs. They have KJ Jefferson and a respectable offensive line, a defensive line that has some key players. The way that Colorado can win, I think, is the fact that, like, Josh Hoover torched their secondary in that TCU game. So the reason I just can't pick Colorado here or won't, because they can win, is Baylor sucks. And Colorado State sucks. North Dakota State, relative to the FBSs, is not good. And I believe that UCF is closer to Nebraska than a lot of these other teams that Colorado has played. And Nebraska themselves, yeah, they have a good defense and a good offense. But, I mean, watch what they did against Illinois. I mean, Illinois eventually broke them in the trenches. I just, with it being on the road, UCF, they're not coming off of a bye, are they? Or are they?
No, they played I think they played last week. That's when they played TCU.
No, yes, they are. They are coming off of a bye. They played at TCU 2 weeks ago because TCU just played SMU. Yeah, UCF is a bye too. They've had 2 weeks to prepare for this at home, and yeah, I just think that it's a little too much for Colorado to overcome. Can they? Yes. Will they? I don't think so, especially given what UCF has on the ground.
I just love Colorado because like UCF's pass rush isn't that good. They're like one of the worst teams in America at getting consistent pressure on the quarterback.
Yeah, that'd be a problem.
And like we've seen, when you get Shedeur time, the work and maneuver inside the pocket, he's gonna kill you. This is definitely gonna be a game that comes down to who gets it last possession.
I'd agree.
But I really believe that Colorado has the better team because they got more talent offensively and defensively. UCF does have the advantage, but I just can't see UCF being able to slow down Colorado's offense, especially in a game where they're going to be heavily dependent on running the football more than Colorado. So their margin of error for this game is a little bit smaller than Colorado's because if you take so much time off the clock, that means you got to score in those possessions. And if you get held the field goals, like we've seen Colorado's defense being able to do, it kind of does go in their favor. I just feel if you don't have a defense that you know can get constant pressure on Shedeur, anytime you play Colorado, you're going to be in the ball game with the kind of firepower they have offensively. So I like Colorado 38-35. I can see it being something like that.
Yeah. We'll just have to see. We'll figure out when it's on, 3:30 p.m. on Fox, and the game will be over at about 7:30, just in time for Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan State, Penn State, Illinois. We'll get to those games in a few. Really quickly here, Iowa State at Houston. Iowa State's favored by 16. Cincinnati at Texas Tech. Texas Tech's favored by 3.5. And Arizona traveling to Utah. Utah's favored by 9. Who do you think wins those games?
So I like Iowa State in the first one over Houston. Houston may be one of the worst, if not the worst, P4 team right now. What were the other games?
Cincinnati at Texas Tech. And Tech's
I
favored by
like
3.5.
I like Texas Tech.
And
I like
Arizona
Texas
at
Tech in
Utah.
that one. And I'll take Utah over Arizona because
Yeah.
Arizona State or Arizona.
Arizona. I don't think it matters that much, but Arizona.
Yeah, I'll end up taking Utah in that one. Like Arizona with that new head coach they got, Brett Brennan. Yeah, they definitely wish they had Jet Fish still there. Definitely not going the way they thought. So I like those. I like those three teams to win.
Yeah, he objectively looked clueless when Kansas State was just murdering them and moving them all across the field. Like watching that unfold convinced me that Kansas State was going to be this force to be reckoned with. And they could still be. I just think that the problem with their strategy that they like to employ of, running the football and really only passing when you have to and slowing down the game and not like portaling or recruiting at the level that, other schools that like to run the football, such as Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State now, Penn State this year with Kotelnicki, is that your margin for error is tiny. So when you have that many turnovers against BYU, well, it's just going to get ugly and you're going to lose. And as for Utah's done a phenomenal job. I mean, that is one of the only teams, non-SEC or Big Ten, that is top 10 worthy, along with your Miami Hurricanes. Like, those are probably the only teams outside of the Big Ten and SEC who I would put anywhere close to a top 10. I have Miami in my top 10. Utah, for now, until Rising is back, I don't think is quite a top 10 team. But regardless, we've already talked about Washington and Rutgers. What do you think about Minnesota traveling to Michigan? Michigan's only favored by 10 points, by the way. Minnesota's coming off of a pretty humiliating loss at home to Iowa, and Michigan's coming off of a close win over USC at home.
Man, listen, one thing about that Michigan ground and pound, man, it ain't too many teams that's going to be able to stop it. And what's so demoralizing about playing Michigan is that you know what they're about to do, and you're still not going to be able to stop it. The fact that they engineered a 2-minute drive against USC to win the game, only running the football, which is absolutely diabolical. I got a lot of respect now for Michigan, Sam. I mean, that ground and pound, there aren't too many teams that are equipped to stop that thing. Minnesota defensively, they're pretty decent. They're pretty good. They struggle on third down. They also struggle against the run. They're 79th in America in rushing yards per game allowed, which doesn't vote well for them. And they're kind of like what Michigan is. You know, they're not really having too much success right now at anything offensively. They got one of the worst offenses in the nation. So it's like when you're going up against that defensive line, Mason Graham, you got Josiah Stewart looking like the second coming of Lawrence Taylor out there. You just got to have a little bit more if you want to be able to keep this thing close if you're Minnesota. Even though Michigan can't throw the football that much, it doesn't really matter, man. I like Michigan to win this game 27-14, maybe 27-10. Maybe giving Minnesota any points at all in this game is a little bit generous, but it's just, you know, that playing Michigan's defensive line is like running into an absolute brick wall. You know, like it's just hard to move those big boys that they have up front. And Minnesota, you know, they a few years ago in 2019, we were saying roll the boat. You know, the boat has sunk. And
Yeah,
at
the
this
boat's been
point now,
torpedoed.
yeah, like at this point after this game, it's probably going to be somewhere floating in the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah, I mean, Caleb Johnson, Iowa's running back, he had like nearly 10 yards per carry on them for over 200 yards. It was majestic watching him run the football and Iowa block. Iowa killed them in the second half. And Michigan and Iowa this year are actually pretty identical. I would say that Iowa actually has a better passing offense than Michigan does. And to this point, the better individual running back. Michigan probably has the deeper running back room, the better tight end room, more team speed on all sides of the ball. Much stronger up front than Iowa, but weaker in the secondary. I mean, but they're overall very similar teams, just with tweaks here and there. And if Minnesota lost to Iowa by 17 at home, I imagine they'll be a little bit demoralized. And then you're heading on the road to a Michigan team who runs the ball as well as Iowa does. I'm in full agreement with you. This is going to be ugly. What do you think? Quickly here, let's check this out. What do you think about Michigan's schedule here? I know I can't see the whole thing, but I'll scroll down. So they beat Fresno State, lost to Texas, beat Arkansas State, and also USC. You have them beating Minnesota, and I do as well. How do you think they'll do in their final 7 games? Like at Washington, at Illinois after a bye, hosting Michigan State, hosting Oregon, playing at Indiana, taking another bye, and then hosting Northwestern, playing at Ohio State. Like, how many losses do you see? How many wins at most do you see? Like, tell me what you think about this schedule when you're a team as one-dimensional as Michigan is.
I only see 2 losses, Sam. And really that's the Oregon and Ohio State. The Illinois game, I feel can go either way because Illinois is, you know, one thing about the Big Ten is that there's a lot of teams that kind of have the same philosophy of Michigan. You know, we're going to run the football down your throat. If we got some good quarterback play, that's a plus. You know, the Big Ten is based off if you can be physical, if you can play big boy football. And the only teams that have the ability to do that or Oregon and Ohio State in comparison to a team that can actually punish Michigan for not being able to be balanced on offense. Illinois, you know, Luke Altmaier is a pretty capable quarterback. That game is on the road, but it's a toss-up for me because, like, although they are kind of structured like Michigan, do they really do have the talent on the O-line and D-line to be able to give that game, you know, somewhere of a chance of being an upset? I'm not really confident enough to say I trust Illinois that much. Oregon, I like Oregon to win the game just because Dan Lanning has built his team based off, trench play. He comes from Georgia. He specializes in that area, especially on the defensive side. So I see that being the L. And losing to Ohio State this year, I still stand by on that statement. Ohio State just looks like a different beast this year. So I can still see Michigan going like 9-3, 10-2. Are they still a playoff team after that? I really think it comes down to that Illinois game. I really do.
Yeah, that I think that the only thing I may push back on is what about Indiana? Like, do you think they're totally fake, or do you think there's some legitimacy to them being an efficiency monster? Because if so, that changes everything. Because that's
I'm not
another road
really
game.
I'm not really that high on Indiana because they haven't really played nobody that has been good. Like their best win has been UCLA. They've blown out Charlotte, some school called Western Illinois, the Leathernecks. Shout out to them. That's a pretty cool name, the Leathernecks. And they beat FIU. They got a transfer portal. They pretty much are a transfer portal heavy team. They got a transfer portal offensive line in there, and they haven't really been tested. And, they could beat Maryland. I really think this Maryland game is going to say a lot about Indiana because if they can win that game and they can beat Northwestern, then okay, they could be a sneaky team. But it's hard when you just got a transfer portal offensive line in there to have a good offense because most teams that have a transfer heavy old line, 9 times out of 10, they end up being a disaster on offense. So I got to see a little bit more out of Indiana before I start singing their praises. You got to be the Big Ten team first before I can actually say, okay, I got a good read on you. I still don't know what Indiana is.
But they beat UCLA. Come on, legendary Big Ten powerhouse who almost got shut out by Hawaii in week 1. Yeah, they do need to be tested. I think you're absolutely right. I think that Indiana, though, frankly, is kind of what Florida State should be in terms of using the portal that efficiently and dominating against inferior competition.
Well, it helps that a lot of those dudes follow Quinton McEnaney from James Madison. There's a lot
Yes.
of JMU folks on that squad, but if you got a team that mostly is assembled from guys you got from James Madison, your ceiling's only so high until you start running into some of the better teams on your schedule. But Indiana, they look decent. I had them actually starting out 4-0, so I'm not really that surprised. I just got to see more. I think they can be a 6-win team. Quinton McEnaney has shown the ability to turn teams around, but they haven't really played anybody yet. That these next 2 weeks is going to define who Indiana is. Because after that, after your bye, you're playing Nebraska, Washington, Michigan State, Michigan. So they haven't even gotten into the tougher part of their schedule yet. Their real schedule begins after they play Northwestern. So they got the preseason out the way, Sam. They've been able to go through the growing pains, get some kinks figured out. These next 2 games is going to show just if Indiana is a legitimate team.
Agreed. Completely agree. I had them going 6-6 in the preseason and also 4-0 to start out, so I wasn't really that surprised either. What I was shocked by is just how dominant they look in their games. I know it's against scrubs, but their efficiency is off the charts. And with Nebraska looking the way they did against Illinois, speaking of which, we're going to talk about Nebraska and Purdue just in a few seconds. And just with, Michigan looking a little bit weaker than I thought they were. I mean, they took a massive step back from last year, not just a big step back. And some other things that have transpired in the Big Ten. It looks like Indiana could legitimately win 8 or even 9 games if they play their cards right. And that's like taking in auto loss to Ohio State and the fact that they may slip up in some other areas. But yeah, I need to see it to believe it. I do cautiously believe, which is why I've picked them to beat Maryland, but we'll see if they do. What do you think about Nebraska taking the road against Purdue? Nebraska favored by 10. I got the Huskers winning big, like 52-7 big. What says you?
Yeah, man, Purdue is just an awful watch. I don't know how Purdue fans can even turn on a Boilermakers game. I mean, how can you watch your team when you know that the opponents that you face view them as just dog food at this point? Like Notre Dame put 60 on you, and you got a defensive-minded coach. How the hell does that work out? Dylan Raiola, this is a bounce back spot for him because late in that Illinois game was the first time this season he looked like a true freshman. He was holding on to the ball a little bit too long. He's making some questionable decisions. This is a bounce back spot for them to get their season going back in the right direction. I like them to win like 35-7. Maybe me giving Purdue 7 points is being generous, but Nebraska just all around is a better team than Purdue. Ryan Walters, that's their head coach, ain't it?
Yes.
Yeah, man. I feel bad for that dude, man. I had a homeboy that played for Illinois. He said he's a fantastic defensive coach. Looks like one of those hires where you got a head coach that's better off as a coordinator than he is the head man.
Yeah, it sounds like he's trying to run his defensive scheme at Illinois at Purdue, but he doesn't have the personnel to do it, and that's just it's killing the defense. Like, they don't have the speed or physicality that's required to run the scheme, and they're refusing to simplify it. And, yeah, Nebraska, I'll say this. If Nebraska doesn't dominate Purdue, and this may be a little bit extreme, if they squeak by Purdue, 5-7 is a realistic possibility. Like, I wouldn't say I'd predict it after that, but their schedule is backloaded. Very easy at first, very challenging at the end of the year, and they have to come out and to a certain sense gain like a rite of passage in this game and win big. And I think they will, because like you said, Purdue's a total disaster, and Dylan Raiola is really freaking good, and he has good receivers and a good defense with players like Nash Hutmacher and Ty Robinson, who just honestly got outplayed against Illinois. No shame in doing that as long as you rebound. Ohio State traveling to Michigan State. Buckeyes are favored by 23.5 points. Who do you got here, and who do you have covering?
Man, I got Ohio State, and I got Ohio State big. Like, I'm a big fan of Aiden Childs, but he still has a lot of things that he has to improve on. He hasn't been as dominant as what I thought he would be. But Michigan State is a pretty well-coached team. They are a team that they find ways to win. And listen, when you play Ohio State, you can't still be searching for your identity. I still think that Michigan State is soul searching. They're trying to figure out who they are as a team. And Jonathan Smith, he has a pretty good coaching staff. But it's just, man, Ohio State, they spent $20 million on their team this year, and those purchases that they made with those NIL dollars, they definitely are paying off. Well, Howard looks pretty good. They got this true freshman freak, Jeremiah Smith. Everybody keeps talking about the dude down there in Alabama. As impressive as he's been at 17 years old, this Jeremiah Smith dude, you talk about the full package. This dude looks like the second coming of Julio Jones, Sam. And I don't know how you can be 18 years old, fresh out of high school, with the physique of like a 250-pound running back damn near, man. This dude is well built. He's a machine. He's a specimen. He can run routes. He can moss people. He can win 50-50 balls. Like, where the hell did they find? Who created this dude at wide receiver? This is just unfair. This is like Calvin Johnson meets Jerry Rice at wide receiver right now that I'm watching.
Steroids? No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I mean, he's been absolutely phenomenal for them. He could very well, and I'd say right now is their best receiver, and that's with Emeka Egbuka, who's an NFL level receiver as well. Not like Marvin Harrison Jr. or Garrett Wilson, but Emeka Egbuka is up there and pretty talented. I also have Ohio State big. I think that Michigan State's well coached though, and I think that they can run the ball, and Ohio State's defense is conservative enough to where maybe Michigan State can be competitive for a drive or two, but after the initial, pre-game plan is expired, because you have to make adjustments, Ohio State's just going to pull away. Way too much talent. Michigan State does not have the discipline as a team to, I think, beat Ohio State. Maybe to compete
I'll say
with them.
this. if Aiden Childs plays up to the level expected and he's not throwing 3 interceptions and whatnot, they could give Ohio State maybe a little bit of a scare because the talent is there with Aiden Childs. This is a game where he needs to come out and show some of that flash in the pan, some of that flash in the bottle, show that he truly can be the future at QB for Michigan State football, because I've been really disappointed with him. I expected a lot more out of him so far than what he has shown this season. 7 interceptions, 4 touchdowns. He hasn't really been panning out. Jonathan Smith might have been better off just bringing DJ Uiagalelei with him.
No. He DJ Uiagalelei has like Spencer Petras level passer rating in QBR. I didn't even think that was possible.
But out of all the places DJU has been, Jonathan Smith got the best out of him.
That's
and he last year, DJU's production at Oregon State is better than the production he's getting out of Aiden Childs. Like, Aiden Childs last week against Boston College only completed 48% of his passes. He had 3 interceptions to 0 touchdowns. Like, my reasoning for being high on Michigan State this year somewhat was because of Aiden Childs. So for him to kind of, be out here looking like this, I just shake my head, man. NIL, bro. With all this money you're making, you got no choice but to be good nowadays.
Yeah, and it's not even just that too. It's the fact that like I think you get a lot of ego with this money and stuff, and a lot more carefreeness and like people being like way too liberal with the football, or not, holding on to it as much, like that type of stuff, like turnovers, being relaxed, not having proper technique. But there's also the fact that Aiden Childs and DJU played behind one of the nation's best O-lines last year, and Michigan State's banged up there, and just it's going to take more than a year to fix something. It's the same thing with like USC's defense. It's going to take more than a year for Lynn to field a top 10 unit. It's also going to take more than a year for Michigan State to get a great offensive line. But yeah, he's been objectively disappointing. Biggest game for the Big Ten, 7:30 p.m. on NBC. We got 19th ranked Illinois playing 9th ranked Penn State in Beaver Stadium. Penn State is a 19.5 point favorite, which is crazy for number 9 versus number 19. And then I looked into it, and it's not crazy at all, especially when you think about how dominant Penn State's been on offense, and the fact that, well, Illinois has won 2 ranked games, but by 1 possession. What do you make of this game? I think Penn State's winning big. Like, Illinois will put up some points, but that Penn State offense is going to come out, and they're going to be on fire in a whiteout, or a mock whiteout, but same thing, basically.
We know one thing about Brent Bielema teams is that when they're good, they're good up front, they're good on the D-line, they're good on the O-line. But what's different from the Brent Bielema teams that we've been accustomed to seeing is that this team can actually throw the football. Luke Altmai's playing some real football out there. He's out there looking like a quarterback now. And with his improvement, I can see this being a close game. That Tom Allen defense, Sam, I still can't get over what the hell Bowling Green did to them. I know it was week 2. Maybe we can just chalk that up to the randomness of college football. But listen, people always talk about how hard it is to play in Beaver Stadium. You feel me? And for Bowling Green to come in there with the Mo Bamba song that you be having that be going crazy on College Football 25, and all the hype that people give this home crowd, this home atmosphere, Bowling Green dropping 27 on you showed some vulnerability with that defense. And Illinois, this ain't no random team. Like, they got a good offensive line. They got a good D-line. And I can see this being a competitive game. Like, I'm just not going to make it seem like Illinois doesn't have a chance, because when you're good up front, there's not too many games you don't have a chance at being able to win. And they do got a solid defense, but I will take Penn State because just situationally, I don't think Illinois is that great. They got a bad third down defense. They're not that good in the red zone. And Penn State, to me, I'm still not sold on their offense completely, because I think that this game is going to show us a lot about just how big of a factor the hiring of Andy Nicola-Nicky has been on this offense's improvement, because you haven't really played against any teams that have a defense as good as what Illinois does. And even their defense isn't that great, but I do think it will show a lot about them because they do have a good pass rush. They do have the ability to be somewhat serviceable when it comes to their run defense, but they also are really good at forcing turnovers as well. And Penn State has had an issue with giving the ball away. So I will take Penn State. I don't know if they'll cover. I can see them winning by 17, but this game is going to be a pretty big test for Penn State with, I believe they got USC coming up within the next couple of weeks as well. So this game is kind of like a little bit of a exam for them, or a little bit of a pop quiz to prepare them for their midterm that they got against USC the next few weeks.
Yeah. Yup. They got USC in 2 weeks, because USC, after they play Wisconsin, they play Minnesota on the road, and they return home to play Penn State. Yeah, I mean, I think that Illinois will be able to put up some points. They may get a few defensive stops, but Penn State, I think, has a better run game and pass game than Nebraska did, and probably a better overall defense too. And for Illinois, it's back-to-back road games against good teams, back-to-back night games on the road against ranked teams. And I think that unless Illinois is like this, 2023 Washington, 2013 Michigan State team that just wins close game after close game and is just a masterclass at closing victories, I think Penn State wins, and I think they're going to win big. In particular because I've seen nothing so far to prove me wrong that this Penn State team isn't better than previous Penn State teams. I think the Bowling Green game, while concerning, was a tad bit of a fluke. You look at the West Virginia game and also what they did against Kent State, which is expected and any good team should do, I think shows that they're explosive offensively. And defensively, they just have to clean up a few things and also find someone to replace KJ Winston at safety. All right, real quick through here, these final 3 games, then we'll get on out of here. Oregon traveling to UCLA. Oregon's a 25.5-point favorite. Who you got?
Oregon.
Yep. Oregon. Easy. Maryland at Indiana. Indiana is a 7-point favorite.
I like Indiana, man. I can't trust a Mike Locksley coach team. I can't.
Yeah. That game last year where they let Penn State put up a 50-burger on them was pretty humiliating, to say the least.
I still can't get over how they sold that game against Michigan, man. Like, they get in these close games that nobody expects them to be in, and they just always find a way to lose it, man. I'm done with Mike Locksley, bro. Like, I love me some Mike Locksley, really likable guy, but it's time for a new face down there, man. He ain't even recruiting the area of Maryland how he should. Like, Maryland's a really underrated recruiting pool, or a really underrated recruiting hotspot. You feel me? Like,
yeah,
I'm done with Mike Locksley.
Yeah, if they lose to Indiana this Saturday, the fan base might have some of that. But given that he has brought them more success than anyone since Ralph Friedgen, I think he's pretty safe. But like, if Indiana just blows them out, that would be pretty embarrassing. Or maybe not, because efficiency metrics say, and you may be floored by this, efficiency metrics actually say Indiana is top 10. That's just without priors, though, and with the weak schedule they have, no one really believes that yet. But the computers say Indiana is really good and would beat most teams in the country. But again, we'll have to see. And then finally, Wisconsin traveling to USC. USC is a 15.5-point favorite.
I like USC with the points, man. Like, when Tyler Van Dyke went down, that was their season. That's it. That other quarterback they got back there, man, it's so disappointing, man, because you put all these hours to get ready for these games, and you're banking on guys staying healthy. They go down, and you ain't got no competent backup. It's about wraps. And USC, they definitely look determined to avenge that loss they had to Michigan. So I expect for USC to roll in this game.
Yep. I think that Wisconsin will be able to control the clock, but USC has enough receiver talent and quarterback talent and also enough on defense to where I think TOP, 35 minutes to Wisconsin, 25 to USC, but I think USC will score fairly quickly because Wisconsin's defense is nowhere close to what Michigan's is. And I expect also that Wisconsin's offense probably will turn it over maybe once or twice. Yeah, I got USC in the points as well, as I detailed in today's preview and prediction video. Okay, well, that's it for tonight. Thank you, JT, for coming on and for giving us your picks and talking about the season so far. It was really fun.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate you for allowing me to come on here. Always enjoy talking some college ball with you.
Yeah. We'll have you back on soon, and we'll see you guys very soon. I'll be doing, as I did last Saturday, a live reaction to one of the Big Ten games on Saturday. Probably the Michigan-Minnesota game, because there's not much in that noon slate, but we'll see. Thank you all so much for coming on. Remember to like, subscribe if you haven't already. Check out JT Sports channel via the link in the description. And also join our Discord server via the link in the pinned comment. And check out Chris Gates' 80% discount for his 2, 3, or 4-day fitness plans and exclusive access to his coaching, his workout tutorial videos, and all the resources that he has on his website. Thank you all so much, and I will see you guys very soon.